This information is for educational purposes only and is not legal advice. Genesis chapter 1 verse 26. And God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, and over all of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. And that includes government. You see, man created government to serve and protect him and to look after his affairs. It's an administration, and we employ people to run it. It's a bit like a corporation. It's a lot like a corporation. It's a fiction, it's artificial. It's not real, like flesh and blood, or the trees, or the sky. You know, so it cannot make law for man without our consent. Because the government have to use contracts to gain authority over man. And these contracts, they pass through Parliament as legislation or acts of Parliament. They're not laws yet, else they would be called laws of Parliament, you know, to save ambiguity. And all contracts need two or more parties. Contracts have to have mutual consent by two or more parties who are both capable of contracting. There has to be full disclosure, a valid offer, and acceptance. Contracts must be voluntary in nature. So when I sign for a business license or a driving license, whatever, I give my consent to the rules, to the terms in those contracts, giving them the force of law. So how does the government get your consent to things like, you know, parking your car on public property, having a TV licence? I mean, there's thousands of these things. Having a bloody drink in park with your friends, for instance. If you're not operating in commerce, how do they get your consent to these things? Well, the birth certificate is a document of maritime admiralty jurisdiction, and it pertains to the Sea of Commerce. It comes from the process of ships carrying cargo on the high seas. You yourself came from the waters. You know, you were once seamen in your father's testicles. You all went into labour. Your mothers who delivered you was contracting, and you got your citizenship. And the word commerce in the Oxford English Dictionary literally means sexual intercourse. Go and look it up. So, follow it through with me. A ship carrying cargo on the high seas comes to berth. It's called the berth of a ship. The ship comes to port, you know, the waters break, and it goes down the berth canal and reaches the dock. The doctor, who signs a certificate for the ship's resources. You know, and when you go to court, you get in the dock, don't you? And the banks, they control the flow of the current. The banks control the flow of the currency, and you make withdrawals and leave deposits in the bank. It's the Sea of Commerce. Because the birth certificate is simply documentation that a man or woman was born and connected to a juristic person with legal status, you know, by the parents. And it certifies that a human resource was born for purposes of commerce, because human labour is the most valuable commodity. And when you agree to be in that legal title, you give your consent to the rules of that legal entity and to perform the duties of that legal entity, whether you're engaged in commerce or not. I'll just go and get my lad's birth certificate and I'll show you. You know, they'll always ask you for your name first. The police, the courts, the TV licence company. You know, they'll always ask you for, because it's your token to play the game of commerce. It's a bit like the pieces on a Monopoly board. It's exactly like that. You can't play without it. Now this is my lad's birth certificate, Mason George Bostock. It says here, warning, a certificate is not evidence of identification. It's not evidence of identity. What else does it say here? Crown copyright. Crown copyright. This is not my lad's name. This name is owned by the Crown, and you use it to operate in commerce. So if I get fined for parking my car on public property, you know, parking it outside my house, and I get fined for not having a permit to park it on a public road, and I'm not interrupting the flow of commerce, I'm not infringing on anybody else's rights of access, then there's no injured party, no problem. Statutes and acts are supposed to protect mankind from other people, from government, from big business and corporations who try to infringe our natural inalienable rights. They're not supposed to push us around. So what is a law? It's simple, it's very easy. The law is very easy to understand. You don't cause any harm to anyone or any loss. You don't be fraudulent in any of your contracts with people. You don't cause any harassment or distress. You don't infringe on other people's rights. Your rights end where other people's begin. That's common sense. That's using your moral compass. That's governing yourself, being responsible. Okay? Everything else is legislation. It comes under legal. You are an infinite being of the universe. You were created by the universe, equal to every other man and woman on this earth. Nobody can push you around. Nobody can tell you what to do. Okay? As long as you stick to the natural law of non-violence, the non-aggression principle, you can't go far wrong with that. And people say, oh, you have to have all these rules, else there'd be chaos. Well, there's chaos now, if you haven't noticed, and we've got all these rules. I mean, I agree there has to be rules of commerce, but rules for responsible people who cause no harm to others, who are forced to pay taxes to fund government schemes they don't agree with. That makes me sick, you know. It's wrong, it's morally wrong, it's a total violation of the non-aggression principle. It's the initiation of force by other men and women who were supposed to all be born equal, using force to get things done. It's wrong. And now we've got an unelected government called the EU passing so-called laws for the UK, which pisses all over the 1701 Act of Settlement, which takes a big steamy shit on the 1689 Declaration of Rights, probably the most important document in our country's history, which clearly states that no foreign prince, person, prelate, or state hath or ought to have any jurisdiction, power, superiority, preeminence, ecclesiastical or spiritual, within this realm. And this is evidence that the present monarch has broken her coronation oath by giving royal assent to these treaties. So when I get knobheads on YouTube saying, you think you can do what you want, you think you can park anywhere and do anything and not suffer the consequences, I say, no. I say, use your common sense. I govern myself responsibly. By your logic, you can just drink and drive 100 miles per hour, and if you don't hurt anyone, then no harm done. Well, that's irresponsible for a start. And you're proving that you can't govern yourself, and you're infringing on other people's rights of freedom and safety and security and the pursuit of happiness. You should just move to another country if you don't like all the rules of this one. No, you move to another country. My ancestors have marched through rivers of blood and pus to carve out a society, a system that protects all men and women. So then, Dan, why do you pay council tax if you've got no contractual obligation to do so? Well, I pay council tax because it would lead me to extreme inconvenience. I pay council tax under duress. When men in black uniforms come round to my house and drag me off to jail, and if I resist, they will shoot me. They're the criminals. They're the ones who break the non-aggression principle, and it needs to stop. We have to pick our battles until this information is back and spread like a virus. Instead of sorting out the crime and the problems we've got now, they just keep taking away more of our civil liberties, bringing in more rules, creating more problems, more chaos, more of a mess, more anger. And 'cause people are kept ignorant of this information through the public education system, through mainstream media, through religion, people willingly participate in it, and it becomes a way of life, becomes the way of life. This is the knowledge that will truly change things. The spirit of 1689 is rising in this country. The politicians have had their go, and they have failed us. Society is in a mess. It's time for the people to rise up and take the power back. You are a human resource to your leaders. And it's business as usual for them as they play around with your life and soul like amoebas in a petri dish.